Yeah, so I got one last feature of the Biddo bot, so let me just try Biddo Disco.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right.
Built this week, breaking it down. Built this week, we show you how. A fresh idea, a clever tweak. You locked in, you built this week.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Built This Week, the podcast where we share what we're building, how we're building it, and what it means for the world of AI and startups. I'm Sam Nadler, co-founder here at Rise Labs, and each and every week I'm joined by my friend, business partner, and co-host Jordan Metzner. And this week we have a special guest.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me, Sam and Jordan. Nice to connect and a fan of the podcast. My name's Amar. I'm based here in the Bay Area in Menlo Park, and been working on Gen AI solutions for developers. We build agents. My company Biddo, we build agents for developers, really centered around deep code base understanding. And I'm excited to be chatting with you guys today. And obviously, always lots going on in the world of Gen AI. So there's some cool stuff to discuss.
Hey, Amar, great to see you. So happy to have you here on the show. Obviously, it's been a crazy, past 10, 15 days in the world of AI over the Thanksgiving break. And happy to show you what we built. I thought it'd be a fun tool as we connected in our pre-call. So I think we can jump right into that. And let me show you what I built. And then maybe we can have a little fun. So my understanding was Biddo doesn't have a formal Slack integration yet, or Slack bot yet. So I built a kind of refresh of Slack. I built this using Google AI Studio, which has been really helpful in kind of like building out these types of tools. So, a very basic prompt about building kind of an AI agent, about building a bot agent for Slack, and it kind of helped me imitate the Slack interface. How does the Biddo agent work? So the first thing you can do is do like Biddo help, and Biddo help will tell you all the things that Biddo can do. So it can review code, it can do tests, it can explain, it can do last, stats, fun, help, or surprise, or other things. So I thought the easiest one is maybe we can just start with Biddo last. So that'll give you an actual review of your last PR. So what it's going to do here is say like, okay, here's my last PR that I did. It implemented dark mode with toggle, and here it's showing that it failed due to a critical security bug. So it looks like my PR didn't pass, and here's all the reasoning why that I got from the Biddo platform. Okay, great. So now that I realized my PR failed, which is, not so happy, I figured, maybe I could have a little bit of fun. So Biddo fun is, hey Sam, why did the developer go broke? Because he used up all his cash. Okay, so
That's awesome.
All right, so Biddo's got jokes.
I have used that joke in some cold emails that I have sent out, and it gets a really high.
It hits. It hits.
Really, I mean, it hasn't resulted in amazing responses, but it gets a really high open rate.
Okay, cool. So I also built Biddo Surprise. So let's see what Biddo Surprise is. Oh, cool, surprise. Okay, so it actually wrote me a Biddo haiku. So let's see. Code push to main. Fingers crossed the tests all pass. Prod is now updated. Okay, cool. So we have like a little Biddo haiku. It looks like, I guess I got to fix my security vulnerability bug, and then I can push to prod. But I have one last feature.
You had some maintainability bugs in there too, which is kind of critical. So
yeah, so I got one last feature of the Biddo bot. So let me just try Biddo Disco.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right, so Biddo can dance and play disco music, and that is my Slack Biddo bot. I hope you liked it.
Yeah, thank you. That was cool. I think we should roll this out to production right away.
Well, it's I would say it's definitely not ready. It might need a full pull requests before it's ready for that, but we love using Slack as an integration channel, obviously, and we use it all the time for notifications and like call outs when things don't go right, etc. So I didn't go too deep into it, and as I'm not obviously like an expert user in the Biddo platform, but I'm sure there's some other kind of Biddo calls that you could build in here that could make the Slack integration incredibly helpful for other developers.
We have had this request for like, hey, can you make my code review notifications, or just let me know as a developer when the review's finished running, or highlighting issues, or maybe for the reviewer, hey, like Biddo's run, here's some things that it's found, now you can dig in, kind of thing.
Okay, cool. All right, so on our segue into that, tell us a little bit about Biddo. Kind of why'd you build it? Where did it? Tell us a little bit about your history of like why you decided to get into the space. Obviously, AI and coding is just the topic du jour in general. So, how does Biddo stand out, and kind of what are its differentiators, and how are companies using it?
For us at Biddo, we've been focused on developers for our whole history. So we're really trying to build powerful kind of enterprise quality agents for developers. I mean, for us, everything really kind of stems from deep code base understanding. So we think that that is kind of critical to unlock all of Gen AI, or kind of the next level of Gen AI. I think, of course, everyone's using tools like Cursor and Claude Code and Codex and Copilot and whatnot. But I think what we've seen is that those tools really excel at vibe coding, and everyone talks about, hey, when I'm building something totally new, they work great, almost like kind of one shot. But when I start to get into my existing kind of gnarly code base that's been built for 5, 10, 20 years, and I have millions of lines of code and hundreds of repos and different services, all of a sudden these tools start to kind of break down, right? And so our first agent is really around code review, right? Where we kind of deeply go and understand your code base, how it's all connected, the different services you have, all those kinds of things. We build symbol indexes and abstract syntax trees. So in GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, we can run this really thorough review, and what teams tell us over and over again is like, hey, the quality of the review that you're able to provide is just far beyond simple things like telling Cursor, Claude Code, hey, review my code, like it just tends to find a lot deeper kind of issues around performance, security, scalability, vulnerabilities, all those kinds of things, logic issues, etc. But, we really feel like that deep code base understanding has a lot of applicability more broadly. And so we're looking at, ways to enable that, even to help teams with finding production issues and other things, and can they use it to like maybe understand code bases better and things like that. So that's really kind of what we're focused on, and we're excited, seeing a lot of traction with larger companies.
Awesome. So just so I like understand correctly, and I'm a big Cursor user. Obviously, like and some of these other tools you mentioned, obviously they're great for reviewing the code you just wrote that minute, because it is in some sense, or the code it just wrote that minute. But to your point, for like a large mono repo or a large microservice based repo, it's really hard to get any of these tools to be able to index that amount of quantity. None of them have the ability to do that. And so what happens as a developer is you're able to analyze what you wrote, or what the AI just vibe coded, but not how well that fits within your entire code base, both like stylistically, security, et cetera, right? And so essentially, I guess, these integrations, I guess, of writing these vibe codes with this classic code base end up failing, and hence where your tool comes in most value. Is that like the best way to put it?
Yeah. I think the way I would think about it is like, so we actually have like, you can run our review in Cursor and Windsurf and Claude Code and stuff as well. So, we Visual Studio Code, JetBrains. So like lots of teams use our agent in their IDE as well to review their code, because what we're able to do is, again, with all the different tools and the agentic approach, like we're able to just go much deeper. We break up each diff into a different view. We're understanding, like, maybe you do have, like, for example, a simple thing would be like, you're just reviewing some code and you say like, oh, well, you didn't have error handling. Well, maybe that team doesn't really care about error handling, or the error handling is being handled more upstream, right? So those kinds of things. Or again, because you have that deeper understanding of the whole code base, you're able to say, hey, you've changed this service here, but now, that's going to result in a problem in this upstream service that calls it, so you're able to like point out those issues, in a much deeper way. And so I think if you have like a simple kind of, code base or you're just doing a vibe coded project, yeah, I don't think Biddo is like probably necessary for you. But I think if you live in like an enterprise environment, that really makes a difference. Something that's, a real quality gate. The other thing I would kind of just mention is we're seeing a real proliferation of these tools, right? So, as you go into larger companies, like some people are in Cursor, some people are in Claude Code, and a lot of times people are like, oh, well, front end team is using this other thing, or we're using some back end developers using JetBrains. So then you're kind of in this mode of like, well, is everyone actually reviewing their code locally? We really need a formal kind of gate check as this code is going to production. And I think the other thing we're seeing is that the amount of code that everyone's producing is going up dramatically. And so if you don't really have like a formal kind of gate check, who knows what's kind of getting into production? I mean, we've seen teams tell us things like PRs are getting so big that reviewing code is taking days now. And also when a bug gets into production, the developer a lot of times didn't even write the code. So nobody really knows what's going on anymore. It's everyone's like, I got to go check and figure this out. It's so different than 2-3 years ago where like somebody's like, I wrote that code. I deeply understand how it works and I can start thinking about how this bug might be happening. Now people are like, well, I scanned the bug, maybe I ran some unit tests, but like I need to go like learn this code now to understand why there's this production issue.
How do you think, and obviously I'm not an expert in this domain, but how do you think about like the quality versus speed trade-off? Like in terms of, I think Biddo is working to help teams have higher quality code pushed to production, but does it significantly hurt like the speed to which they're moving?
It's actually speeding teams up. So we're seeing on average PRs merge in 10x the speed. So a PR that used to take 50 hours to merge is now merging in 5 to 7 hours, because most enterprise teams still have 1 or 2 people who manually go and review a PR. But Biddo's agent runs and we provide feedback in 5 minutes. So a team like Rakuten or Gainsight or Whatfix or whatever, I mean, these teams are like, hey, I got my PR feedback in 5 minutes. I used to have to wait maybe a day or 12 hours to get feedback. So the developer can quickly address those. Then the senior reviewer who comes in, the developer who submits that code and the reviewer are still responsible for the quality of that code, and so, but then that senior reviewer who comes in is like, okay, I don't have to deal with all the basic blocking and tackling. I can focus more now on kind of architectural level thinking, high level design. So they also know that the PR review isn't this mind numbing task of going through the code line by line and being responsible. So they come in a couple hours. They don't have as much feedback to give. So the amount of, typically we're providing like 80% of the total feedback that a PR receives. And, where customers are seeing bugs go down by like 53, 55%. Like the number of kind of reverted PRs in the month following is down by 55%, right? So it is helping speed the team up and do a better job because it doesn't get tired. So it kind of feels to me like a no-brainer,
I guess as these teams start to get these PRs rejected, they get even better at like their processes, and so that also inherently speeds up the team, right? The flywheel gets smaller and smaller for issues that get blocked into PRs, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can also implement custom rules and guidelines. The agent actually looks at what the historical discussions your team has had. It also learns like what things your team is not paying attention to that we're flagging. So we're saying, hey, your team doesn't care. But yeah, I mean, I think we've seen a lot of people say, hey, this helps my junior developers learn, right? Because the agent is flagging stuff. So some people want the agent to be noisier and chattier in the sense of like highlighting more issues because they're like, hey, these teams can learn from this. Other teams are like, hey, we just want like production level issues, that are going to cause big problems in production. And we call it like essential mode. So, we find every team's a little bit different in terms of what their needs are and what their desire is. But it is a learning tool as well, absolutely.
Can your customers set these settings? Can they have it, hypersensitive or, lower sensitive? Amazing.
Yeah. So you can say, hey, I only want like really essential issues. I want a more comprehensive thing. I want you to flag these other issues. And then the agent, like I said, is learning from what your team actually does. Lots of teams, or let me say team leads or engineering leaders, have a different vision of what they want than what the team actually does. And so that's also, we're finding that it's helpful for us, for the agent to learn, like, what is the team actually doing? And we've seen some teams say, the engineering says, don't look at what my team does. Here's what we need. And so I want the agent to do this every single time. And then other people are like, you should learn from what my agent's doing, my team's doing, and then adjust.
That's cool. Yeah, obviously it depends on the product, what they're building, what their stack is. I mean, what the team's goals are. I can totally see. I can even see, just depending on like even the repo or even who the developer is. I mean, maybe for a lower level developer, you would maybe want like more restrictions on him, and higher level expectations, versus maybe higher level developers, maybe give them kind of more freedom over time. Super cool. Super cool. Well, Amar, awesome project. Really, really cool application. And
one more question.
Yeah, sure. Obviously people can go to bito.ai. But how else should they get in contact with you? I mean, go ahead, Sam. Sorry to...
Yeah, I was just, without giving anything away that's top secret, kind of what's next? What's on the horizon that you're excited about?
Yeah, I mean, we actually have an exciting product launch coming up next week that I won't totally share it all yet. But I think, I talked about deep code base understanding being kind of one of the things that we've really, really focused on. And I think we've been, both thinking, how can we help customers get more value out of that, but also people asking us and kind of, saying, hey, how do we, how can we leverage this outside of just code review? So that's, an area that we're working on and really excited about for now.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. So we don't want to ruin that. Awesome and cool, awesome product for developers. And let's jump into the news. Let's go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, okay. So, news story number one is Code Red at OpenAI. Code Red at OpenAI. OpenAI has, or Sam Altman has declared a Code Red internally. This leaked, I think, within the last 48 hours, pulling back all other initiatives to focus solely on the ChatGPT product. Obviously, I think it's in response to Google and Gemini's, significant advancements over the past several weeks or months. Would love to hear your thoughts on this competitive pressure from Google to OpenAI.
For a long time, I've kind of felt like OpenAI went too broad, too fast. They kind of have gotten into so many different areas, voice models, video models, image models, there's ChatGPT, there's coding, and I feel like, they've got the consumer business, the API business. Now look, they are the biggest player in the space, 20 billion in annualized run rate revenue. So, I mean, I think I can understand how they got to this situation, but it felt a little bit like they were going, if this space is going to be so big, you're going to need to like really be good at a few things. And I think by kind of going after everything, they've left a lot of room around their flanks, so, Anthropic has really kind of excelled in the coding use case. Anthropic's also really good at writing. Now Gemini, I saw like Mark Benioff over the weekend said he thought Gemini 3 was significantly better than ChatGPT, and he switched over to that after years of using ChatGPT. I mean, I personally haven't felt like Gemini 3 is like so groundbreaking per se. I know on the benchmarks it's done really well, but I do think it's quite a good model. Like I'm using it now, whereas before I was just kind of defaulting to ChatGPT and Claude. But now I'm like, oh, Gemini, sometimes I like its answers better and whatever. But I still think it's like a really the product is not nearly as rich, can't make a PDF or, things like that. But they have so much distribution, right? Like, they've got the button in Gemini, the Gemini button, in Chrome. They've got AI mode now, right? And so it's kind of front and center, in your face. And they also have an ad model that allows them to not have to charge consumers, right? They can make money from the ads. Whereas, ChatGPT, is a lot of the revenue is coming from their ad model. And I mean, there's no internet product that has achieved mass scale, like on the order of, 1 billion users or more, by having a paid model. There's just not enough people that are willing to pay money. So, I think that it probably is a bit of a code red. I mean, I don't think it's that they're roadkill or anything like that, but I think they do need to probably focus in a little bit. And actually, it's funny that sorry, it's a long comment, but the Stratechery blog kind of mentioned this week that they think OpenAI needs to get an ad model. And I thought it was so interesting that, I think these articles have been saying that they put their ad products on hold, to focus in on ChatGPT, and I think go more into the making the product better, which is probably a good start, but they're still sticking to the paid model as their primary mechanism.
Yeah, it's been, I mean, I think from my perspective, I think, it's been a dangerous few months for them. And I think you mentioned some of the points here, but, it's obvious like Nana Banana has like the best image generation as far as the largest models on the market. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of like, Salesforce just invested, more in Black Forest, so they're trying to double down in image generation, but obviously Google has got a pretty awesome model for video generation. I mean, as of the past few weeks, Veo 3.1 was probably in the front spot. Obviously, we've seen some new models come out. But I think going back to what you're saying about Google and Gemini is, most of the things I want to do with these LLMs is to create slides or to create a Google Doc or to create a Gmail, right? And so the distribution is so dangerous. I mean, I know they've launched like Nana Banana inside of Slides, but, the kind of gamification of Google Slides and connecting Gemini into Google Slides and into Google Docs where, half the time of what I'm doing in ChatGPT is just like copying and pasting to go create a Google Doc to like put it in there, So I think the opportunity is kind of unlimited, both like on the consumer side of like the Gmail users plus like the enterprise side. And I don't know. I think the real danger is that like Google has like almost unlimited free cash, and ChatGPT, I mean, like who cares about their 20 billion in revenue? Like how much of it was profit? The answer is probably none of it. And therefore, like they're going to continue to have to raise capital, whereas Google can just give away their products for free and integrate it into their stack. And we use Google Suite. I think like most startups use Google Suite as like their Gmail, email suite. And, they can probably lose money for longer on like, financing or sub-financing this thing. And then maybe on top of that, maybe Google's TPUs allows them to run this even cheaper, right? And so they're just like, I can run this for cheaper and longer than you. And, here we go. And I don't know if like, people really understand like what a big war this is going to be. I think the founders of Google hate Elon at this point. I think Elon hates them. I think Sam hates Elon. I think, Elon hates Sam. I think, I think this is a straight up war.
I mean, XAI, I have to give them a lot of credit. Like, it's miraculous to me how quickly they built like a pretty decent model, with Grok 4 and Grok Fast Code 1. And, it just, I mean, within a year, they kind of showed up in the leaderboards and a really impressive kind of cost performance ratio. So that is, I mean, I thought Elon had a lot on his plate, and somehow he stood up 100,000 GPUs and just went to work, and it's pretty amazing with the team.
Yeah, I think it just means that we have no idea what the future is going to hold for who's going to have the best models in the short term or medium or even long term, right?
Yeah, totally.
All right, let's jump into Amazon.
Well, yeah, talking about GPUs, Amazon releases the new AI chip at reInvent, I think yesterday, was it, or 2 days ago, the Trainium 3, supposedly 4x faster and a cheaper way to train big models. I'm a very bullish Nvidia bull, and I think most people are, to be honest. But what are your thoughts on Amazon's new chip? Jordan, by the way, Amar, is a Amazon alum, so he's got usually some strong feelings about whatever's going on at Amazon.
Got it. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think if you take a step back, there's a number of folks now. I mean, Google's also got, the TPUs. And so I think they also now have gone from saying, hey, we're not going to just offer this in Google Cloud. We're going to also offer this to other people to set up in their own data centers. Like supposedly they're talking to Meta about a, multi-billion-dollar kind of deal. AMD's of course out there as well. So, more and more people are, trying to peel off a piece of that GPU market. I guess I'm a little surprised it took AWS and Google Cloud like so long to like say, hey, we'll make these chips available to anyone, which then makes me wonder maybe they're not that great at the price performance curve, compared to Nvidia chips. I mean, generally what I've seen is that and heard is like from when you're doing training, Nvidia chips are still like blow everybody else out of the water. But when it comes to inference, other people are starting to catch up, and the inference workloads are growing, very, very dramatically. I mean, the sense I still get is that TPUs are still well ahead of like the Trainium chips from Amazon. But then, of course, you've also got folks like Grok with a Q and Cerebras and Samba Nova that are trying to do really fast. So anyways, I think like it feels like you would think in the next year, if Nvidia's dominance or market share was to come down, that it would happen in the next year. But so far, they've done a good job of kind of keeping a lock on the marketplace.
Yeah, so I agree with like kind of most of your points there. I would say that probably Amazon, didn't start to sell it because they didn't have any, right? Like, these chips are 3 nanometers, right? And so like how long does it take to like fabricate them and like get them in data centers and like test them and make sure they even work for their own workloads first? And, how much money do they save by offloading, third-party workloads to other chips, to their own chips? And so I would guess that there's probably some supply, plus tariffs, right? So there's probably some actual supply chain issues that like actually cause them to get these things like up and running. I do think that like as we see this logarithmic curve of these models, that I don't think any of these LLMs have done a good job of, I would say, like routing. Taking basically like simple tasks and sending it to like the cheapest model possible if it's like cheap enough and fast enough. And over time, I know, Amazon has Bedrock, which is kind of like this like LLM kind of routing platform, right? So you can start to see over time, like for certain tasks, you can probably offload those tasks to a cheaper processor, to a cheaper GPU, right? And be able to save a significant amount of money, especially if it's things like maybe like ETL pipelines and things like that, where like maybe they become really common tasks like AWS alternatives, right? My guess is like they just don't have enough. It doesn't seem like anybody has enough. I mean, we try to buy GPUs online and they're very hard to come by, and they're hard to find. Whether Amazon's like TPU is going to be able to compete with like Nvidia's top line chips, it doesn't look like it. But I don't know if that's really their goal in the short term. I mean, maybe they can just offline tasks that are being run by servers that are very expensive today that can move over, right?
I do think there's this like interesting kind of paradox a little bit in the market today, which is, you said Amazon doesn't have that many chips, right? All the producers of these goods, whether they're chips or models, are kind of saying, hey, we're like run out, right? The demand is dramatically exceeding the supply. And then we certainly see that with a lot of model providers when we try to access their models. We use billions of tokens a day, and we're like, oh, they're like, hey, we don't have that much capacity for you, But then when you look at the aggregate revenue that's adding up here, it's not yet that significant. I mean, we're probably talking about 40-50 billion dollars of revenue, a year max, that's happening in AI, which, okay, significant in terms of the growth curve. But, when you look at like the $500 billion or whatever, 400 billion that's being spent on infrastructure, that isn't that much revenue, So again, maybe that's just we're early in the investment curve, and that's going to adjust over time here.
Everything's a wrapper, right? So, let me just finish that, right? Like, Amar, like everything's a wrapper, right? And so like all you need is one bottleneck inside this like wrapper flow to, essentially limit capacity. And whether that's coming like, from TSMC out of Taiwan, or like Nvidia out of the chips, or out of the data center, or the power limitations, or even just like, the pipeline of internet to be able to get to these data centers, right?
I mean, it's not that dissimilar to like maybe in that sense, if you look back to like late 90s, early to 90, you couldn't get servers. That's exactly right? Servers were like this commodity, and not commodity. I mean, they were like this precious good. I actually, funny story. My next door neighbor when I was growing up was this guy Ed Zander, who is the COO of Sun Microsystems. We put the dot in .com, and getting servers from them was like getting GPUs. Last year it was like $100,000 a server, and it was just crazy how much you had to spend, and like they didn't have them. They were like, we're sold out, and so everybody was like trying to get those things, and like you said, and then they were like, we can't produce the chips fast enough. So when you go through these kind of boom cycles, it's like when oil fields are like going cranking and people are like, I can't get enough people to drill the holes, I don't have enough drills. It's the same thing.
Well, the IBM CEO says the math isn't mathing with this capex build out, and that it just, the returns aren't going to make economic sense. I know we just kind of commented on this, but any follow-up thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is very related to the discussion we were just kind of having, right? Which is that the investment that's being discussed, or being committed to, I mean, is really massive, right? And I mean, I think he says in this article here, 8 trillion of capex means you need 800 billion of profit, not revenue, profit, just to pay for the interest, right? So that means you probably need, $1.5 or $2 trillion of revenue, to pay to get that profit, to then, just pay the interest cost to cover. So that's not actually like even giving you excess profit that you can put in your log below your expense line, right? So, I mean, that, seems like we're pretty far from that. And again, this is a super huge investment market and whatever. I mean, I think the interesting thing a little bit is like, do you need to go down this path, right? So if you look at Anthropic, I think the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, somebody just had maybe Forbes, somebody had a big interview with him, with Dario, just a day or two ago, where, I mean, he was kind of, they're playing a different game, and he was just kind of like poking fun at, or a jest or whatever at OpenAI, being like, yeah, do you really need to spend all this money? I mean, again, they're spending quite a bit of money too, but it's literally an order of magnitude less. I mean, I think their loss this year is supposed to be $2 billion. I think OpenAI is probably like at 10 or 20. And so they're kind of like, hey, do you really need to spend, that much money to train your models? And so it does appear that there are other approaches you could, kind of take. I mean, if you look at what's coming out of the Chinese labs like DeepSeek and Moonshot and all that, I mean, they're probably making fun of Anthropic, right? They're training models at 1/100th the price of those models, or at least 1/10th. So yeah, look, I'm not an expert on this, so, and everyone loves to be an armchair quarterback, but, it does seem like we're getting a little bit over our heels here, or skis, I mean.
Amar, thank you for joining. Jordan, thank you so much. It was a great episode. If episode 23, if you have a chance, like and subscribe, and we'll see everyone next week.